We're called Neons. Sinners plucked from hell to do God's dirty work. But I'm finding it hard to believe we're in heaven.
Neon White is the latest kinetically charged first-person shooter from Ben Esposito, the mind behind critical darling Donut County. It's a fast-paced platform puzzler that has you using soul cards to dish out damage and reach the end goal unscathed. It relies on fast reflexes and pitch-perfect timing. I recently got the chance to catch up with Ben and find out a little bit more about the process behind Neon White's creation and how he and the team at Angel Matrix are feeling now that the game is out in the wild.
We're really happy with the reception. Like, we were pretty surprised to see so much positivity, kind of unanimously when it comes to reviews and stuff. Like, not obviously not everyone's into everything, but we didn't really think of this game as like something that was going to please everyone or have something for everyone, and we had no intention of doing that. So it's kind of like a surprise to see so much positivity around it.
One of the things that I was doing before this interview, I was doing a little research as to your career, because you've gone through a few different genres to get to this point. Obviously, like the very first game you did was a platformer called Nudo. How did you go from a little puzzle platform from that to Neon White, and of course in between all of that, Donut County?
Okay, that was 2010 maybe is when I made that game with my friend Manuel. 2010 in indie games was like the era of the puzzle platformer. So there was definitely something in the air that we were trying to the idea of a mind-bending puzzle platformer was like really interesting. And something that I really like is games that have this more like physical or kinetic feeling to it. So that's why we kind of came up with the idea of like, it's a Rubik's Cube, but you have to like physically like obey gravity and platform on the cubes as you move them around. That was kind of like the start. And I was always interested in puzzles. And then, I worked on a handful of other games. I worked on The Unfinished Swan, which is kind of a puzzle-y game, but, more of just like kind of this artsy experience. And eventually I prototyped and made Donut County, which took like 6 years or something because I made it mostly by myself. And that was like kind of an extension of that puzzle game, that like kind of more kinetic puzzle game. So it's like it's a puzzle game with a hole and everything's physics based. So I can't guarantee anything is going to happen. And that's probably why it took a long time to make. And then after that, I was like, I feel like I've done that. I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish there. And so I started thinking about like, well, I was making these games that were like really weird and kind of broke all the rules and were trying to aspire to some like other kind of art. And so I decided like, well, what if I just made a game that really tapped into what I love about video games? And so I kind of looked back to before 2010, and I remembered when I was, a teen, I was playing first-person shooters like Counter-Strike and Team Fortress Classic and Quake, and I was like doing all these like fun like movement-based platforming mods and maps and stuff. And so I wanted to do something totally different that tapped into that feeling. And the same with the aesthetic. That's like kind of what I was into at the time. So that's like where Neon White came from.
Why soul cards? Where did that idea come from?
Concept of the game isn't that it's like a shooter so much that it's like a platformer and it's a little bit of a puzzle. And so like taking the emphasis away from like the gun feel and stuff and focusing on the idea that each gun that you have is actually like a resource that we want you to get rid of. Like that was kind of like something that motivated the cards. Originally, I was trying to make even more card-based first-person shooter where it was like you maybe had a deck and you would draw cards randomly and you deal with like whatever resources you had, and it sucked. It was no fun because getting random guns from your deck is like just not fun for anyone, and I should have known that going into it. I eventually like came up with the idea of discarding after that, and I was like, oh, this idea of like I can trade it for a movement and the movement can also kill enemies. That's how like I even stumbled upon the idea of like speed running and like optimization and stuff. And that's the only reason the game exists. So it's a happy accident.
Was there any concern during development that fans or newcomers would be confused by the idea, or was it just because it's for me very simple? I got it straight away. Were you worried that like general first person fans would be like, what's a card? What am I doing?
I was confident that if you were to try it, you play like 3 levels, you're like, oh, I totally understand. This is actually really, really simple and straightforward. So yeah, it's maybe there was another way to do it that would have been clearer to people, but I feel like, we weren't that concerned with doing something weird because that was kind of the whole idea of the project. So like it's another weird barrier that someone will have to make it over, but when they do, they'll really enjoy themselves.
How long would it take to come up with the ideas for each level, like placing all the different elements, how far away a platform would be, and so forth, or little shortcuts as well?
The design of the game overall hasn't changed dramatically since we started working on it. So a lot of the levels were like prototyped, in 2019. We had a version of them and they got refined, but we kind of knew really fast if a level was going to work or not because they're kind of like conceptual. Like each one has to have a main path that's interesting and uses, one of the concepts of the game, but also it had to have this shortcut built into it as well. And so a lot of them we kind of like had a cool idea, but it just like wasn't going to work on both vectors at once. So we would try to just like do them pretty rapidly and get to a layout stage that we were happy with, that felt like it solved the problems before we ever like put artwork onto it at all.
Was there anything on the cutting room floor in the end that you had to just sort of like, this isn't working?
There's a ton of levels that did not make it in that were, and we tried to make certain concepts work. Like we always had this idea of like, it would be so cool to have a level where the ending was at the beginning and you had to like go out and back to the beginning. Our lead level designer, Carter, was like obsessed with this idea and he made like probably 3 or 4 levels that used it. That was a challenge. We did get one level that does it though. So
even more interesting though for me is the fact that it works so well on Nintendo Switch. How did that come about? Because obviously Switch was the main platform that you wanted to work on. Were there any technical difficulties in terms of getting it to run as smooth as it got in the end?
For us, it made so much sense because the game's really meant to be played in these really short, repeatable chunks. So like each level's really, really short. So you can kind of just like jump in or jump out and whenever you want. So yeah, we wanted to do Switch, but because it's such a fast-paced game and it requires such a level of precision, we also knew that it had to run really, really well. There weren't any huge things that we could really do to improve everything. It was mostly like every single like asset needed to be touched in some way. So there was a certain point where a few years ago now, I guess, we started working with Unity to port the game, and we basically like remade all of the shaders for everything in the game and all the materials, and we made it look like it used to. And it like you can kind of see it in the original trailer, it looked a little bit different, but yeah, we like basically remade everything.
You worked with a really kick-ass soundtrack in this game. Did that help sort of drive the motivation of the speed of the game as well?
We got a band called Machine Girl to make the soundtrack, and that was like our first pick for like the vibe of the game.
Nice.
And they hadn't done a soundtrack before, so they were really excited about the idea. And we ended up producing a huge amount of music for the game. It was a bit of a back and forth to figure out like what level of intensity was appropriate, because I would kind of like I would like share some videos and stuff with them, and then they would be like, oh, the music I'm making is like too intense for this. I need to like match the video that you sent me. And I was like, I pushed back a lot because to me, like the speed of the music and the intensity of the music is meant to be like more aspirational than like scoring the actual like moment to moment things you do. So like we did want it to be like a force that pushed you forward, and that was kind of like what we tried to do with that with all of the soundtrack.
Where do you think the future of first-person shooters is? Should we be focusing on multiplayer? Because they just announced recently single-player Apex Legends.
Whoa, I have to look into that because I like Apex.
Me personally, I would like Titanfall 3, but I'll take it.
Oh my god, I would love a Titanfall 3 campaign. Titanfall 2 campaign is like still unmatched to this day. The future of first person shooters, that's a good question. I don't know if I'm even qualified to answer that. Like, I know that I kind of like have love for both sides of it. Like, was the thing that got me into it was Half-Life 1 when that came out. That's when I was like starting to get really into PC gaming, and I would make maps and mods of it, and it was just like a tremendous like rabbit hole to go down. And then I got into the multiplayer stuff, and Counter-Strike, beta came out, and I was obsessed, and I played like every single version of Counter-Strike since then. And yeah, like I think they both have their merits. My work is definitely way more focused on like these comprehensive aesthetic single player experiences, and I have a feeling I'm probably going to continue to do that because that just is something that interests me more as an artist, I guess. But I do still play a lot of multiplayer games, and I don't think that's ever going to go away, because I think any game that has like real staying power, it ends up being kind of a social game in some way, even if it's single player. So I feel like Neon White is trying to kind of do both, where like it is a social game, even though it's like, a story-based single player aesthetic experience.
Ben, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was fun to chat with you about it.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. And of course, you can find Neon White on Switch and PC right now.